You're listening to a Soul One podcast.
All right, this is a rare one, Taylor, because our episode comes out right on Christmas morning.
This has probably happened once before with the way the calendar works.
Well, we've been on the air, 7 or 8 years doing this, so at least twice. I think that's how it works, right? It's like a 4-year-ish cycle.
I remember when I think we were still in the studio, so it might have been the first year we were recording, and we got fan questions saying, we celebrated Christmas by listening to your radio. But I think they were still listening to it like on the radio. And we're like, you need other hobbies.
Wow. Well, to be fair, that was before, things like Stranger Things dropped episodes on Christmas Day. And of course, the NFL took over.
Yeah, there was no content.
There was nothing.
We were the only.
There was your family and us.
The pony in town.
The only fresh content, anyway. It wasn't.
That's right. That's right. To be accurate,
Santa Claus comes
fresh.
to town with Frank Sinatra. Yeah. Oh heavens, what is his name? Anyway.
And so, Mike, we kind of just forgot to introduce Father Quirk, but he reminded us that third voice.
Yeah, Father Quirk's been on the show so much, he just sort of blended in and jumped in.
Trying to keep me down, that's what it is.
That's right. Yeah.
If it's a third person, they're not the co-host. What are they? Because it's...
No, they still refer to it as co-host. No matter how many you have, they just refer to them as like the hosts or the co-hosts of the podcast.
All right. Well, you're our unofficial third co-host there, Father Quirk. We're happy to have you back. And this is an extra special episode, like Mike said. It is coming out on Christmas Day. Yes, Christmas Day.
Yeah, right. And 4 a.m.
4 a.m. Right when you're opening your presents, if you have toddlers. And you can put us on in the background because we're talking about Christmas ghost stories. Well, maybe that's not an accurate depiction. Father Quirk, you should probably explain what we're talking about today.
Right. Well, they are ghost stories, though, that we're going to be looking at. It's in a sense, think of Christmas Eve. So think of last night when you were hurriedly kind of wrapping gifts and watching reruns of It's a Wonderful Life and probably drinking too much. In the past, what would have been the case on Christmas Eve would be the telling of ghost stories. And it's an old tradition that goes back really quite far. If you think of, how, the dark winter's nights and the telling of stories and in a sense, the sense of that kind of boundary, if you like, between kind of like the living and the dead, during the wintertime, that becomes a kind of much more porous thing in kind of earlier societies. And so that, you have this kind of tradition of telling stories in the midst of winter, and gathering the family around the fireplace. So I'm going to go harken back. A lot of this is drawing on a kind of literary tradition. So Charles Dickens's The Pickwick Papers, probably not something you guys have talked too much about on your show. 1836, in the chapter that deals with Christmas at Dingley Dell, what you have is this image of these guests gathered around a fireplace reading ghost stories to one another. This is Charles Dickens, his kind of great kind of first novel. And it what we see in that is this older tradition of telling ghost stories, very Victorian, to gather around the fireplace at Christmas, tell ghost stories to one another. And you can imagine, how you've got this kind of festive sociability. You have this kind of, it's almost a controlled kind of sense of a little bit a frisson of terror, if you like, of fear. But ultimately, of course, it's kind of like, the family. It's in the context of family and friends. So there's the community there as well that is, in a sense, kind of reinforcing that. And, everyone knows Charles Dickens as A Christmas Carol, where the ghosts function as these kind of moral agents. who come and show Scrooge the error of his ways, and they confront him with kind of like the past, his own kind of complicity in kind of unjust systems in society, and also time, of course. He's faced by his own mortality, and in all of this there's this kind of message of redemption, if you like, there that is and so it's a kind of happy story in the end, isn't it? And the past returns, if you like, in order to heal the present. Well, one of the stories we're going to have today is a Dickens ghost story. Of course, it comes out actually in Christmas 1866, The Signalman. It's published at that time. Much darker, though. Much darker.
Father Quirk, I was going to say, not out of the 3 things you had us watch, not a single one had a happy ending.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Which goes really against the description you just gave, which I agree with. A lot of the ghost stories I'm used to, even like A Christmas Carol, that kind of thing, they usually have some kind of a happy, nice, hopeful ending that I think kind of embodies the spirit of the time. But these were some dark
bleak
films.
and
bleak. Yeah.
This is much more in keeping with the whole thing, like these kind of like ghost stories, the telling of the ghost stories. It's not that the ghost story itself has a happy ending. It's that, in a sense, the family and the community are, they're relieved at the end of it all and drawn closer through this kind of shared fearful experience. So that's actually how it kind of functions. So yeah, you're right. Not one of them actually ends in a particularly happy way. So like certainly the Signalman is quite different from Dickens's earlier A Christmas Carol, isn't it, in terms of its tone? So the real kind of high point of the Victorian Edwardian Christmas ghost story comes really with the work of M.R. James, and that's the first one that we had, A Warning to the Curious. His is the kind of pièce de résistance, if you like, in terms of the Victorian kind of tradition there. Real classic. And so James wrote his stories, and he actually wrote them to tell to his friends at King's College, Cambridge, on Christmas Eve. The Chit Chat Club was the name of this group that he met with, and they would read stories to one another. Actually, they would sit around the fire and they would, or they'd write essays, little things that they would write for one another. And then James, on one Christmas evening, actually writes this ghost story, and it's this kind of arrives fully formed. It's wonderful kind of. So they're well worth reading. So James is the kind of the high point of that. So those 2 first that we had. As I said, just before, as we were getting ready, they're kind of the amuse-bouche for that kind of that third one that we have, which is the ones that we're going to see. The first 2 are they're only just over half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that in terms of length. A Warning to the Curious. It's actually published quite late in James's career as well, 1925, post World War One, the Great War, and I think to a certain extent you see that. James's earlier stories are maybe a little bit more hopeful. This is a kind of much more dark story, actually. A Warning to the Curious. Knowledge brings no safety at the end, in that.
Father Quirk, we talked about this in the office. Well, when we get into talking about them, we can go more into it, but I thought, wow, that ending is so unjust. What an unjust ending. But
absolutely grim.
Just quickly, I have a quick question for you, Father James. So what you're describing is this sort of Edwardian, Victorian tradition of written ghost stories.
Yes.
And then in the 70s and 80s, you grew up in England, and you grew up with these TV adaptations, these sort of what are they, like telenovela or telefilm?
No, they're really just, it's Lawrence Gordon Clark in the 1970s. He comes up on Christmas Eve or thereabouts, sometimes the night before, something like that, 22nd, 23rd, 24th of December. He decides to dramatize these in kind of 40-minute kind of episodes, these short stories of M.R. James's. And I grew up with these. These are just kind of wonderful, kind of like just adaptations that we had And so he's, you know, he's a kind of BBC director of dramas, does a wonderful job of them. And so those first two are out of that first state, the first 5 years, 72 and I think 75 are the 2 years that I've picked out here. But there are others as well. Um, and so they're these early adaptations are, you know, they're very kind of powerful. I think, you know, to be honest, you know, part of the power of them, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think part of the power comes out. It's the 1970s. They did not have fancy special effects, and they did not have big budgets. So they're on site, and they're relying an awful lot, actually, on creating a sense of place, if you like, and a sense of dread, because they just don't have the budget to actually do any special effects. And so it's hugely effective in terms of the way that, in fact, they use the place and their cinematography and the sound work that they do to build a sense of dread. And I think they do it really well. So I hope, hopefully, people as watching this, they can see that kind of what they're doing. But to be honest, I think part of it's actually just simply about, we don't have a lot of cash, folks. So how are we going to do this?
Yeah,
and do it effectively.
And we talk about that on this show all the time, that the lack of funding and certainly the lack of technology of a certain time forced you to be more creative and innovative. Yeah. So sometimes the working around budget constraints, you get the best results anyway. And I believe that about film and other art forms, that sometimes the restrictions that are placed on you allows you then to be more creative, as opposed to just having $200 million budgets and trying everything CGI, and then you kind of lose something in the atmosphere. I will say one thing about all three of these movies, or, you know, shorts that we ended up watching, they all are effective at creating atmosphere.
Oh yeah,
like they do that so effectively. And I agree with you. I think it's because it feels real and raw, and I think there's something scarier about that than CGI monsters. I mean, Taylor, you bring that up a lot.
Oh my goodness. And I like you said, Mike, it feels, even though they're constrained, a lot of the time the you know, practical effects feel more real. Sometimes they're hokey, right? Like sometimes you can tell a practical effect. You can see the string on the bat, especially in like the 1930s and 40s. But when practical effects are done very well, they often feel more real. And so it's funny to me that now it's too expensive, quote unquote, the studios claim it's actually too expensive to do practical effects, whereas in the 70s, 80s, and 90s they were forced to do practical effects because they didn't have the budget and they didn't have the technology. So which to me just seems so crazy that, like, oh, it's actually cheaper now to do CGI schlop. And sure, it's cheaper, but it looks horrible.
But it looks horrible, and often you do get into a scenario where I think the lack of creativity does shine through. Like, that was a point I was about to bring up, is the price for practical effects is still high. It's costly to do it. It's difficult. But I do think it's worth it. And again, like these particular pieces, like a lot of them were, I assume, I don't want to speak a term, but just by looking at it, shot on locations as opposed to like sets, right? A lot of them looked very much location based, and that adds to it too, because that real, tangible, I can taste it, feel it, smell it almost.
That's real sand.
I mean, I will say, especially in the two shorts, I thought both of them, it's like you can feel the atmosphere of this. Like, I think it's coming through quite clearly.
That's right. You know, like they went kind of to East Anglia and they filmed, you know, A Warning to the Curious right there in Seaborough. Like, this is actually Seaborough, the place where it's set. And so it's all filmed on where James actually set his you know, short story. And so, you know, there's a kind of authenticity that comes from that. And again, you know, but what's wonderful is that they know how to use it. Clark really knew how to actually make use of his, you know, the setting. You know, I think it is part of, you know, what, it's not just that he was forced to use it. He actually knew how to use it to actually make it even more effective as a piece of cinematography, as a piece of television. So the last one.
Sorry, Father Quirk, just real quick. It's the English the coastal regions, at least two of the movies are kind of set in more like coastal towns.
That's
They
right.
almost become another character, which is a little cliche to say, but certainly, like the mist in the Woman in Black, which you're about to refer to, right? The being
Yes.
on the moors and the water washing away the road, all of that is so crucial to the story.
Yes, absolutely. Like the location. I mean, I don't think it would work if it was not set in that location, and
Yeah.
certainly not in the same way, because as you say, Eelmarsh House and these sea frets that they talk about, and the shifting sands of that the causeway kind of passes through, and it's covered over at certain times by the tide. It just adds to that, doesn't it? It is truly a kind of an important kind of almost indispensable part of the storytelling.
So you had mentioned this to me that and again, I could be speaking out of turn, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost felt like maybe the golden age was kind of the
Right.
decade of the 70s. And
Right.
then this Woman in Black, which is longer than the
Mm.
other two we're going to talk about today,
Right.
was it like would you describe it as a return to this type of storytelling, a reboot of this type of storytelling,
I
or
think
just a continuation?
it's a kind of reboot because, of course, they were in the 70s, and then it kind of went into a little hiatus until Mark Gatiss. I don't know if you know of him. Co-creator of BBC's Sherlock,
Okay.
and so Mark Gatiss really kind of revived this a ghost story for Christmas in the 2000s. So there's lots of them. If you ever have BBC iPlayer and a VPN, you can watch some of these, usually around this time of the year. So more of these earlier ones, and then also Mark Gatiss's later ones as well. But in the middle of that comes this Susan Hill novel, which was written, I think, in the kind of the late in the 60s and 70s kind of period. So it's a deliberate homage to earlier ones, but with a more modern sensibility, and certainly a even darker tone than
Mm-hmm.
even James had, in terms of like there's no kind of redemption arc, if you like, in A Warning to the Curious. Susan Hill really just kind of throws that under the bus, doesn't she, in terms of the way that this story kind of works,
Well, Father
so
Quirk, I read the book synopsis. The book synopsis is even darker.
it is absolutely. And let me just say, all of these stories are worth reading as
Right.
well as watching, all of them. But the book is much darker. They almost kind of like they chickened out a little bit on going kind of full on with the Woman in Black, even though in fact it is a wonderfully scary story. So but anyway, that was a kind of it is a kind of more modern version of this older tradition, this older ghost story at Christmas tradition. And what all three of these shows have in common is, of course, they were all broadcast at Christmas. And like Taylor, when we were talking in the office, you were kind of surprised that they weren't Christmassy in tone. Like where
Yes.
is the Christmas tone to these things?
I thought that they would be like A Christmas Carol.
That's it.
Which is a Christmas story.
It is a Christmas story, really, and we've got. But actually, this older tradition doesn't rely on the kind of the Christmas setting, and none of them do. But they're all told at Christmas time, and for me, Christmas is not. Okay, as a priest, Christmas, of course, is all about the nativity of Jesus Christ.
Let's get that straight.
To be very clear, but I would say, in terms of my kind of experience of Christmas, this is one of those things that you do at Christmas time, which is to read a ghost story. An M.R. James, I read an M.R. James novel, short story at this time of the year, always round about Christmas time, because it just feels like, well, that's what you do. That this is part of the celebration. Part of how you mark this time of the year is to have a good kind of like creepy story, to kind of read and kind of send that thrill up your spine. So anyway, there you go. So there's a bit of a background there for everyone.
I was wondering, Father Quirk, in terms of programming. So the Woman in Black is an hour 40, and the version I watched had the title markers where like it would have been a commercial. So,
Okay. Yes.
the natural kind of breaks.
Right.
So that was like a natural kind of time slot in viewing. So I'm wondering with these earlier ones in the 70s, how would this have been programmed? Because that's such an odd, you're watching Doctor Who and then all of a sudden you get a ghost story and then you go to Coronation Street. Like how was it
No.
programmed growing up?
So the two from the 70s are from the BBC, so no commercials
Right.
on the BBC to this day, actually. So they would just be shown in a kind of a late slot, when they're shown still, because they are actually rerun on the BBC quite frequently. They're always shown about 11 o'clock at night.
When the kids are asleep.
Quite late when the kids are asleep. They're quite late night shows. The Susan Hill, The Woman in Black, that was actually done by ITV, and so it was on a commercial television channel, and so it had the commercial breaks in it. So it was on the rival television station back in the day when we didn't have too many stations in the UK. So
Channel 4, IT,
Channel
and
4,
BBC
I
1 and
remember
2.
Channel 4 coming in. That's right. 4 channels. Woo! So there you go. So that was.
Did your parents let you stay up to watch them?
Yes. Oh, well, this one, of course, I was very much in my teen years when
The Woman in Black came out.
The Woman in Black came out. So I remember staying up and watching it and being absolutely terrified by it. I think it was one of those occasions when I really began to understand. I was old enough to understand just what they were doing to my nerves through things like the incidental music and some of the kind of the shots that they were setting up, and they were just watching the emotions on people's faces. I think really one of those early occasions when I thought, wow, this is clever what they're doing to me in terms of the way that they're telling this story in a way that, without showing me anything, is actually just ratcheting up my fear. So,
yeah.
So, again, I'm jumping into a discussion of it there, but I think that was how they worked. It was on the other channels from the BBC. Auntie, as we call her in the UK. So there you go.
Mike, we originally talked about doing fan questions, but why don't we maybe wait till the end? It will be our Christmas gift to Father Quirk to let him answer some fan questions. And should we go into just doing our review of the shows? Does that work?
Yeah. I mean, that works for me. I'm wondering though if you do want to start Father Quirk with The Woman in Black, just because we kind of ended there, and that might be a nice kind of transition right into talking about it. Also, because I think, at least for our listeners, I think a lot of people would have been more familiar with the remake with Daniel Radcliffe than this kind of original. Now, we did let people know it was the 1989 version, so hopefully people watched along. But
no, again, Mike, we did tell them, because I said we're not watching the Harry Potter one.
Okay. Did you say Harry Potter specifically?
Yes.
Yes.
That's how I remember.
Yeah.
So it's God willing, they watched the right one. I haven't seen the remake with Daniel Radcliffe, but Father Quirk, you have strong feelings about it.
I do have strong feelings about it. I think Daniel Radcliffe is basically a sock puppet and has about the emotional range of a sock puppet. So anyway, he's a child of God and everything like that. But anyway, I don't have much time for him as an actor. So I think this is far superior in terms of its filmmaking. Again, part of the problem with the remake was that they could do things with CGI that they couldn't do back in 1989 when this was made. And I think, so as you were saying earlier, Mike, they had to get creative around that. They had to, they had to tell a good story and not try and distract us from deficiencies in the film, in the cinematography or the acting with special effects. So it all had to be spot on. So this is, again, released 24th of December, 1989. So imagine there you are on Christmas Eve, about 11 o'clock at night, watching a ghost story instead of, as I say, It's a Wonderful Life or Scrooge, which are both wonderful movies and certainly nothing to kind of sniff at. But anyway, I think it is one of the scariest, I think, movies I've ever watched in terms of, as I say, in terms of the way it plays upon your nerves, the way that they set up those scenes. So, Taylor, you mentioned about how, in fact, the environment is a huge piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they do a great job of that as he goes down to Eelmarsh House, and you've got these sea frets, these mists kind of coming across, and everyone is being kind of slightly nervous around Arthur Kidd. He's given this job to go down and to deal with the effects of Mrs. Drabble at Eelmarsh House. And there's an awful lot of caginess on the part of the other
bit rude.
He's just sent down there, at Christmas time, even though in fact, he's a family man, and he's got to go down and do this, and everyone is just like, oh, you're going there, or you have to go down, and I can't possibly go down there, and so he gets sent down there, and it slowly unfolds. He keeps seeing this woman in black in this churchyard. Do you remember in the churchyard? And the man there's the local solicitor there who is talking to him in the churchyard, and he looks over this solicitor's shoulder, and Arthur sees this black figure standing by the grave, and then there's the children along the wall,
and he flips
he immediately
out.
panics. He flips out seeing the children. He starts yelling at the children to go away, go away.
You know what, Father Quirk, it was only until you mentioned that I was like, oh, that's why he flipped out. Because of course you find out at the end, essentially, why she's coming, which is, I made this point around the time we were doing a lot of our Halloween episodes about how in the, at the very essence of a good ghost story is actually a mystery.
Right.
And so this movie very much feels like Arthur, the young solicitor, is trying to find out the mystery of the house. Right.
Oh,
and so it's only afterwards that you're like, oh, you're able to put all of the pieces together. But anyways, go on. So you see the character design is
for sure.
Very good.
Right. You're right about this kind of uncovering of the mystery. So, he's there, and he's got the kind of phonograph there, and he's listening to her recordings. Oh, she was really bad last night. Very loud. I could not sleep, and he's listening to her recordings. And you don't know who this she is at all at that point. And so it's this slowly unfolding story about this tragedy in the family prior to that point. But what's awful is, of course, that the moment that in fact he grasps the tragedy won't let go of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he is then he's as I said earlier about kind of knowledge there's no safety in knowledge. Knowledge is the most dangerous thing for Arthur Kidd in this story, that once he understands, there's no way out for him.
I find that also struck me watching these ones, and I don't know if it's because it's coming from a culture like an Anglo Protestant Anglican culture, but if this movie was made in North America now,
right,
you'd get the church involved, like in a quote unquote like classic horror movie. You'd be like, okay, we kind of know what the problem is. Let's get the experts in to essentially exorcise get rid of the ghosts. There's no getting rid of the ghosts in any of these films. Is that a cultural thing, or is that just it's just part of the plot devices? Because that really didn't that strike you, Mike? That
the lack of ghost busting?
Yeah, like there was the lack of like trying to get rid of the ghost. They're like, oh well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Arthur does try in the end, but is unsuccessful, right?
Well, I guess the missing, that urgency of, that turn in the film where it's like, now we're being haunted. Now we have to figure out a way to get out of this. Like, which is very much, I would say, what we would be more used to in a lot of our kind of ghost stories.
Yes, I think you're right about that. It could be to a certain extent an Anglo-Protestant kind of environment that really kind of breeds that, well, we're not going to get any of these kind of papists kind of coming along with bell, book, and candle and trying to exercise
holy water.
That's it. I think as well, to be fair to someone like James, for instance, like in the story of a rose garden, he talks about how the local rectors had all come along and tried to lay the ghost, so he's not afraid of kind of at least making allusion to it. But I think you're probably right in terms of part of it is also you've got this environment in which here you are, the late Victorian or mid to late Victorian kind of Edwardian period for all three of these stories. Kind of early 20th century. There's a kind of, if you like, the Christian worldview is at least being pushed back by a kind of scientific world. The kind of the modernity is taking hold, and so I think you're seeing a certain amount of that going on as well. The kind of the receding world of faith in Britain is, it's giving way, and in a sense, these ghost stories are a kind of eruption of if you like, the supernatural into this world in which everyone thinks that they have a grasp of how things are supposed to work. Science has answered everything for us, or will answer everything.
A pretty bleak worldview, though, because you don't have religion and science can't fix it either.
That's right.
You just got to live with these ghosts. I do want to correct myself because in what word to the warning to the curious? Right. Yeah, a warning to the curious. He does try to bust the ghost, as Mike puts it. It just isn't effective. But in a North American movie, that would have been
the entire plot of the second half of each movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You put it back, and all of a sudden everything's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
The dawn breaks, and we're okay.
And then in the post credits, you find out maybe things aren't as okay.
Well, that's a very post 2000 thing. There weren't many post credit scenes when I was growing up, but now that's all it would be doing. The films would just be setting up whatever the sequel is.
I felt like these endings were, because again, I'm watching it with like my 90s, post 90s kind of how I understand ghost movies work, right? And so even though these are literary adaptations, so to me, maybe I'll spoil a little bit, people can pause here and go watch. But for instance, I mentioned this to you, Father Quirk, a warning to the curious. I thought it goes against ghost rules, quote unquote ghost rules, that the poor doctor ends up getting haunted, even though he was only a proxy. He's totally not even, he is not involved whatsoever in removing the crown. So that is hugely unjust that he ends up getting haunted at the end of the movie.
Dr. Black, but he was there. He knows where the ghost, he knows where the crown lies. One of the three crowns, if you like, not clowns. Oh, there you go. One of the three crowns of East Anglia. He knows where it is, and the defender of the crowns is going to make sure that it's properly defended. No, I know it's quite something, that final scene where the fellow, the man at the station,
the porter,
the station master, kind of opens the door and says, "Oh, I thought there was someone getting into your carriage." So, anyway, no, it's great. There is a kind of, as I say, the fact that there's no security in doing the right thing there. And so you're absolutely right. There is a kind of lack of justice, if you like. We think, this should end happily. And we don't know how it ends for him, but it's his nerves are on edge, shall we say, and our nerves are on edge as that ends. That was I don't know. Do we just skip around a little bit because we've kind of moved on?
You can do whatever you want. At this point,
I'm talking a
jump
lot.
around, start talking. I mean, I think we might as well move on and kind of just keep going and talk about the
yes, we probably should, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
So,
but I would say, like, I mean, to your point, that unsettling sense of ending, where it's not kind of as happy as we maybe expect it to be, like you're saying, Taylor, but that sense of kind of unsettling and maybe even not quite knowing, to me, that's what's effective about these kinds of stories, is leaving you with a little bit of a question mark. I mean, it's the type of thing, like these particular movies where I'm sitting here being like, I can see or understand what this would be like to sit around a campfire and be told this story, and it doesn't have kind of the natural cinematic ending to it, which I think can be very effective. It's just jarring for some who might simply not be used to this.
Yes. No.
Yeah, that's not. I agree with you, Mike. It's not that it's ineffective. If anything, it's more effective. It's it doesn't give you maybe the closure that we would be used to in modern North American movies, but I think it's hugely effective in creating atmosphere and that eerie sense. And why would ghosts have the sense of justice and morality that humans have? Like, they're beyond the grave, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. So I think it was very effective. It's just it wasn't, I guess I was pleasantly surprised by this group of films, because it, in a way, it's probably different for you, Father Quirk, because you grew up with these, but for me, it felt like it was subverting a lot of genre conventions that I've just come to rely on when watching ghost movies.
Right.
So it was like fresh. It was like these were fresh ghost stories, and they were a lot of fun to watch, and I thought they were quite engrossing. So just briefly, I guess, because we gave the plot summary for A Woman in Black, A Warning to the Curious is that so it's, we have this man who's down on his luck. He's lost his job, and he's a I love this, he's a amateur archaeologist.
I love that. That's so good.
Hey, Father Quirk, didn't you do your undergrad in archaeology?
Yes, that was archaeology and philosophy of my degrees. So yes, archaeology. So this could have been
you.
Hopefully not ending up in the same way as Paxton. No, I think I'm gonna talking about this. It's the amateur. You've got a certain amount of class going on here, because of course he's the working class man, or at least kind of lower middle class man, probably a clerk of some sort, who has lost his job but has this passion for archaeology, who goes because he thinks he might actually find this crown, and at the same time, of course, make his fortune. He make his name out of this. Whereas Black, Dr. Black, he's clearly from a different class, and so he assists him, but comes from a very different social class. Class is obviously a big part in a lot of these stories as well. So I think any time that you get stories from the 19th century in Britain, or even the early 20th century in Britain, class is a hugely important kind of aspect of the story. So just from a kind of literary perspective. But this is one. You were talking about how, in fact, the environment becomes almost like an extra character in the story. And I do think this is the one where I think that is most strongly apparent.
Yeah.
Like at the end of watching, A Warning to the Curious, would you consider going on holiday to East Anglia? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is bleak. It is empty. It is exposed. There is a kind of a kind of horror to it. I think, and I don't think I'm overstating that. I love the silences. in this. And again, I think it comes back to partly, maybe the constraints of the filmmaking in the 1970s. But this Lawrence Gordon Clark was not afraid to leave long silences in his shots, in his scenes, and to keep his dialogue fairly sparse, and to allow, in a sense, the effect of the visuals to kind of roll over us. And I think out of the three, I think Warning to the Curious is where you really catch that sense of environment as menacing. This is not a part of the world in which you want to he goes there on vacation. Like, I wouldn't go on vacation to this
every
place.
year. The Doctor, every year he goes there on vacation. I think the three things that struck me kind of aside from, thematically, they're all these ghost stories. The isolation in like each the geographic locations, like you definitely feel that these are isolated outposts. And you're from there, Father Quirk, so maybe it's not as isolated. Maybe these places aren't as isolated as they seem in the movies, but when watching them, you get the sense that these are places that townsfolk don't typically go to. They're kind of out of the way, and that isolation really plays into that sense of dread. And in A Warning to the Curious and to Woman in Black, specifically those two, the idea of these small towns having their own sort of folklore or their own stories that are protected from the outsiders, right? I found that was really evident thematically, even more than class, maybe that inside outsider sort of thing. Yeah, that was striking to me.
Yeah. I think, the East Coast of England is often used in this way. I've been on vacations in East Anglia. I had a lovely vacation actually in Cambridgeshire. Lovely time. So it's not a part of the world where, but I think they use the isolation. So they are, in a sense, kind of liminal spaces, to kind of use that kind of lovely kind of like literary kind of mode of analysis there, liminal spaces. It is a liminal space between sea and land, if you like, and so you get the opportunity for all of the things you can do there. But anyway, I think that's true. I think you're right in terms of the insider and the outsider. And of course, these are all stories that are set in a time before, like 100 years ago from today. And so, the motor car is still a fairly new experience for many people. There's a lot of people who wouldn't have been in a motor car in 1926. Say, when A Warning to the Curious is there, the train would be significant. I had a great aunt who went on vacation every year. She went 12 miles to go on her annual vacation to another town. The people, we live in a world in which distances have become almost kind of they're shrunken.
Mm-hmm.
And you can consider going on vacation to Singapore in the same way that people in the past would have talked about going on vacation to a location 25 miles away. And I think this is something that it's one of the ways in which these stories kind of feel alien to us, in terms of the insider outsider thing is much more kind of even localized. So,
and then the third movie, we mentioned a little bit at the beginning, Father Quirk, but we've talked more about kind of the bookend movies. This is going to be Signalman. For some reason, I want to say Single Man.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if that job exists anymore. If everything's like electronic
not in
now.
the same way. Not in the same way, of course. A lot of it would be automated. So.
And so this one is. Tell us what this one's about.
So this one, of course, is about a man who is, well, I can tell you, just let me give you a little bit of background to this, because with about 6 months before the writing of The Signalman, Charles Dickens was involved in a rail crash.
Oh, wow.
He came out kind of relatively unscathed. He was on there with his mistress on the train coming back from France, and they came out unscathed. But a number of people died in the railway crash, and so he was, out of that experience, he wrote this story. And so you have, this man who's in a signal box, whose life was really very kind of regimented around, just making sure that the points are clear, sending signals, the line is clear. He's next to a tunnel, of course. And so you've got this whole thing. He's in a cutting. So he's down below the level of the land, and he's next to this tunnel, which, of course, is very evocative. This dark hole that his little signal box sits next to, and below the ground, if you like. And Denholm Elliott, which most people will have seen him in the Indiana Jones movies, but this is he was a real heavy-hitting Shakespearean actor. Certainly in the British film acting establishment from the 1950s onwards. There's some wonderful movies with him as a kind of leading character, and most people only know him as Indiana Jones's bumbling sidekick in the Indiana Jones movies. Where he's there at the college. There's that scene where Indiana Jones kind of tells a story about him being kind of like blending in Turkey or whatever, and of course he's like lost. He's lost abroad. But he's
some great comedic acting, but
wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
But here you really see him kind of embodying this character who is nervous. He's highly strung. You can kind of feel the kind of tension inside of him, haunted by this ghost. And what does it mean that this ghost is haunting him? This figure that covers its eyes and waves its arm. And but also duty, absolutely duty bound. So it's a kind of very kind of wonderfully restrained but tense performance. And of course,
striking visuals as well. Like, I mean, you mentioned the kind of the gaping sort of basically hole in the background for most of the movie of the tunnel. It's just, there's just striking visuals throughout the whole thing. And again, I think the subtlety in the acting performances come across extremely well. Like you're feeling the tension and the fear kind of easily through the screen. Like I thought this one was very, very effective in terms of its ability to make you feel that little bit of unease throughout it.
I also thought, speaking of the striking visuals, of the three ghosts, if you could say ghosts, because the second one is kind of up to debate if it's a specter or a ghost or a premonition. But when you see the man or the figure, covering his face and then waving, and then it like slips and it becomes that sort of white mask. I don't even know that. And you see that maybe 2 to 3 times at like very, very specific points for great impact. So I think out of the 3, that was the scariest visual of the 3 specters. Although there is quite a frightening scene in The Woman in Black when he's in bed and you see her kind of up close. Yeah. But there was something about, I don't know, it almost looked like a death mask. Right. Very, very frightening to me.
It is a death mask, isn't it? It really is. I get that. Actually, I have to say, just going back to The Woman in Black, what terrified me? And actually, I remember watching this with friends and them screaming the house down. It's when the little boy's voice comes, he puts his hand underneath the pillow and he finds the soldier.
Yeah.
And then the little boy's voice kind of giggles.
Yeah.
And then you see her. And all of a sudden, I can tell you, like, it was just screaming. They were screaming their heads off. Anyway, so that for me is one of those things. But you're right. It's a kind of a truly haunting quality to that face, isn't there? Because it's not. It is a death mask, but it's not a death mask of someone who has died in a peaceful death, is it? So.
Oh my goodness! I'm just putting it together. Do you think it's the signalman's death mask?
Yes.
He's seeing his own
I think it's his own face there.
Oh
So
my
so I
gosh,
and,
I'm such an idiot.
at least I think they used his face for it. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's
In
Yeah.
hindsight, now that I'm thinking of it, wow. So
um,
he's seeing his own. I think out of the
but
three, we'll get, maybe it's too soon to say this, but I'm gonna just tease. I think maybe the Signalman for me was the most effective,
I agree.
even though it was the most pared down, like the most
Yeah.
contained.
right, right,
I thought it was certainly in terms of the kind of isolation, loneliness feeling, atmosphere, like
yeah.
it did all those things correctly and well and were effective for me. So I actually agree with you. Of these three, like that's the one that I think it does all these different things we've been talking about to me the most effectively.
So, it's funny really you say that because in fact it is the Signalman that's seen as being that kind of high point of those
Mm.
ones from the 1970s. That by the time, like 72, 73, you had 71 was Stores of Barchester. So it started 71. So by about 1970 76, Clark really had got this pretty much spot on, and so it's seen as the high point of those early ones. And I think you're right to kind of really kind of pull out the wonderfully restrained performance of Denham Elliott in there as the Signalman. I think is I think it's a masterclass in acting, to be honest. And I think the way that it's filmed in this, there's a kind of sense of claustrophobia in that cutting and in the tunnel and even in the signalman's hut there, that it never lets up in terms of the kind of the way in which everything kind of bears in upon you as you're watching it. I think it is spectacular for television making.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Again, when you even think of it being on television, I mean, I think this day and age we're kind of spoiled with the golden age you see a lot of different high quality things on television that matches that really does match films and what you can see on the big screen. This made for sort of TV. I think this was the shortest of the
Mhm.
three, and yet was the one that I'm like, I can't believe this was done in the 70s in a quality I would expect from film.
Right.
And they pulled it off brilliantly with just
Yeah.
it being made for TV, small budget, only half hour or so, maybe 40 minutes, and that's all you have to tell your story, and it was very effective.
Yeah. Yeah. They do it well. They do it well.
I really enjoyed all three of these. Like I said, my favorite was probably the Signalman. I thought the Woman in Black was very good, but
Mm-hmm.
Father Quirk, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I found the actor that played Arthur probably the weakest out of
Right.
all the actors between the three. Do you feel the same way now watching it back in 2025, or do you think that he was quite good still?
I think, I don't think he did a bad job, but uh, as I say, Denham Elliott for me is just one of those actors that I could just watch and watch and watch. There's another thing he does for Christmas, a child's Christmas, a child's uh, Christmas in Wales, which is a dramatization of the uh, uh, oh heavens, who's that Welsh poet again? Anyway, Charles Christmas in Wales. He's the narrator of that. So there's another good one to watch with him. He's wonderful. And Peter Vaughan, the actor who played Paxton. Peter Vaughan is one of those one of these kind of old stagers in Britain. One of the things you often find with the British acting establishment is that, and even to this day, that many British actors will have cut their teeth on the stage. They
Right.
actually know how to act,
Mm-hmm.
like actually to actually act,
Yeah.
and aren't simply kind of coming through, because they've been kind of underwear models or something like
Yeah,
that.
the star, they're not quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote stars, they're just
That's right.
actors.
They're actors who shifted into film, but as you said, they got their start on stage and
Yeah,
probably going to acting schools and taking classes and kind of going
that's
that way.
right. And would keep on flipping back and forth between them. Like it's usually a kind of part of their kind of the profession is that you might be on stage, kind of part of the year, and then you might get an acting gig in a movie or something like that. You might kind of do the movie and then go back to doing stage work. So I think you're right. He's probably the least strong out of the three leads that you have there, and I think it's part of its experience. Of course, the other two are clearly much more older,
Yeah.
experienced actors by the time that they're in these. So to be fair to him, he's a young man. Um, Bernard Hebden, who plays the older man with the dog Spider. What's his name?
Tovey.
Yes, yes. He's another of those old kind of actors, and he can almost he could do it in his sleep. And
Yes,
you
he was
almost
very good.
sense it, just he's got these few scenes, and he just kind of comes across with a certain gravitas, just and anyway. So I think you're right. I think I love all three of these in different ways. So I love the first two in a sense. The Woman in Black for me is a very special TV movie, because of that kind of sense of, as I said earlier, it's the first time I really realized what you could do with a kind of restrained use of kind of special effects, if you like, by not kind of showing too much, how you can actually ramp up the terror, and the terror becomes stronger, and then suddenly punctuating it with these scene, the scene of the woman in the bedroom, for instance.
How would you rank these then for you, just in terms of because we love to rank things, 1, 2, 3? How would you rank them?
So I would go Signalman number one, Wanting to be Curious number two, and The Woman in Black number three.
That's what I would do.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. I honestly would have put The Woman in Black 2, right, and switched out 2 and 3. But again, I think probably splitting hairs. I mean, they're all, as we said, but they're all effective. I also enjoyed all three movies. It's just, I think The Woman in Black story does really intrigue me. I'm familiar with the play as well.
Oh yes,
and I thought the play is also very, very effective. So I just think it's a really interesting story.
Yeah. The book is quite interesting there with The Woman in Black, because of course, they cut out the fact that it's told as a Christmas story. Like Arthur is encouraged by his second wife and his family to tell this story at Christmas. And so he tells the story at Christmas. So that's part of the novel. So there's the kind of the sense in which you've got the Christmas context. That he tells this story to his family, his wife, at Christmas time. That's what an awful Christmas story to tell your family. It's my first family.
Mom, why'd you marry this freak?
There you go. And I've been haunted by this woman in black. There you go.
We hate our stepdad. Anyways, for me, all three of them are see-its.
Yeah.
I would agree with Father Quirk in terms of my ranking. Although, Mike, you're right in that I would say the media story, so to speak, is probably by virtue of the fact that it's an hour 40 versus 40 minutes. But the media story, and probably the most conventional that North American audiences would be more used to, would be The Woman in Black, because it is that sort of ghost story mystery. But they're all seeds for me. I thought that they were very effective, very good viewing, and a little bit different than your typical Christmas fare.
Yeah. And you can find all of them online. And as I say, with a VPN and BBC iPlayer, you can watch them as well through that kind of medium. And Mark Gatiss his revival has also been very, very good. Not just telling, some of them, again, using different writers as well. Edith Wharton, for instance, is one of the recent ones that he did, for instance. So, because this is a much broader tradition. So it's kind of fun to do at this time of the year, and a little bit different from having the saccharine sweet, or, kind of movies that we sometimes get at this time
Christmas.
of the year, or the kind of commercialism on overdrive, of Arnold Schwarzenegger trying to get the latest, the biggest gift for his child.
I got to tell you, though, that's a great film. It's endlessly entertaining.
I do love it. So I'm not, but I'm just saying, these are very different feel, aren't they? That's the thing.
Definitely. And I'll give a shout out to the streaming service BritBox.
Yeah.
which has a lot of British TV and movies, including a lot of movies from the 70s and 80s that you can check out. And I'm sure there's quite a few other ones there.
Oh yes.
I mean, I'll still probably be enjoying my Muppets Christmas Carol, but these definitely got me interested. Like I definitely in watching these, I'm like I could understand why this would be a really cool Christmas Eve tradition to watch kind of a horror movie like this. That it's really just the atmosphere is really what
Just
keeps
imagine
getting
getting
me.
together with your friends and watching
Hmm.
these kind of things on Christmas Eve. I
Yeah.
mean, wouldn't that be kind of fun to kind of, you know? And let me just say this. Okay, so I told Taylor about this, and I want everyone to hear about these. So in the in my childhood, we had this story, this show called Jack and Nori, in which you would have a fairly famous actor who would sit in a chair or would tell a story to children
Mm.
in kind of like 15 minutes, something like that. Maybe they would tell the story over a series over a couple of weeks in 15 minutes chunks or whatever. And so there's a wonderful series that's done a bit like that. So called Spine Chillers. If you can find Spine Chillers from 1981, not just M.R. James and these Charles Dickens stories and various things like that. They tell other ghost stories as well. So Spine Chillers from 1981, where it's just someone basically narrating a story to you, on television. Like this is not the kind of television that we have today, where you've got someone basically sitting and narrating a story. Christopher Lee did a wonderful one, wonderful series in the early 2000s where he plays M.R. James narrating these stories to his friends at King's College, Cambridge, and you can watch them online. So the Christopher Lee, a ghost story for Christmas, wonderful. So and it's you will you will not see television made in this way here in North America, at least not to my experience. Maybe if someone says yes, actually I've seen shows like that, then fine, send me a message. But they're quite different in terms of the storytelling, where it's basically someone sitting and telling you a story, and through telling you a ghost story, and it recreates that initial experience of sitting around a fireplace hearing someone narrating a story, a ghost story. So look up those Christopher Lee ones. They are
Hmm.
wonderful.
Yeah, no, they sound
And
really, really
Christopher
good.
Lee, like who
Yeah.
would not want to sit and listen to Christopher Lee for half an hour telling
Oh,
you a ghost story?
fantastic.
He can narrate
Yeah,
anything.
I
Mike,
know.
absolutely.
I
You could read from the telephone book, and it would be fascinating.
Yeah, that's true.
Mike, I know we're over an hour, but I did mention
Oh dear,
that we were
sorry.
going to give Father James a Christmas gift and let him answer a fan question. Can you stay on just long enough for him to answer one?
Yeah, let's get one here. Let me go back and find them. Oh, here. Okay, let's go with this one because this kind of connects thematically to what we were talking about. So this comes from Chrissy. And Chrissy says, one of the interesting things. Oh, Taylor, this is in reference to you, I believe, reviewing Playdate.
Okay.
Because that's I'm going to assume because basically Chrissy says, when I was thinking about your most recent movie, Taylor, so I'm going to assume this is Playdate. I was thinking about when I watch previews or even the few seconds of a preview on a streaming service, I'm starting to be able to tell right off the bat whether or not this was direct to streaming or it was in the theaters. I don't know if
Mm.
that's CGI or something else going on there, but do you ever have that instance where you look at a movie and say, this is clearly straight to streaming and I'm not going to watch it? Or have you even noticed this trend happening where you start to notice this clearly was made for streaming? So I think this kind of connects. This is a good question if we've ever noticed this, because this connects to what we were talking about to me about, practical effects, like
Yeah.
being able to kind of notice those differences. So have either of you had that experience where you've looked at a preview or something and said, oh, I think this is going to be a bit of a CGI mess or straight to streaming movie?
I will we talked about this recently, Mike, about how Netflix movies, they're doing something in their post-production, or it could even be the way they're lighting their movies. I find that all Netflix movies have started to look alike.
Right.
So I think I could identify a Netflix movie by the preview. Whether or not I'm gonna watch it, that doesn't really factor in because I'm gonna review Knives Out 3 in the new year, and that is a
Mm-hmm.
direct to Netflix movie. It did look like a Netflix movie, but that didn't hamper or not make me want to see it. But in terms of Amazon, what I find tricky is that Amazon, I don't know if it was Paramount or or maybe it was MGM. They took over in the last year. They amalgamated with a major studio, and so they're releasing direct to streaming that would have been in the theaters. So even though Playdate was schlop, that movie probably would have been in theaters a year ago. So I don't think, I'm not able to identify it the same way I can on Netflix, because I don't think Amazon has, because they're showing movies that they've acquired so far, or they continue to show movies that they've just recently acquired. It will be interesting to see in the next 5 years if Amazon movies start feeling or looking the same way that Netflix movies are looking. Father Quirk, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just one little quibble. I thought they were releasing Knives Out 3, giving it a very short movie run.
They are, yeah. In select theaters, they are giving it a movie run.
But it came out on Netflix. It came out on Netflix December 12th, which again is insane. They released it before it even had its theatrical run.
Oh yes, yeah. Because it is a Netflix property, but they wanted to give it a theatrical run because they believed people would go, which I believe. Yeah.
Just my thoughts on Knives Out. Just I think, to be honest, was it Daniel
Craig?
Craig's hair just keeps getting kind of weirder and weirder, and his skin keeps getting weirder and weirder in these shows. So
Dan asked if he got a haircut in this movie.
That second one, what was going on with his and this weird fake tan that made him look like Donald Trump? So I'm probably going to be excluded from the country now, going south. But anyway, I'll take that risk. But anyway, I agree in terms of. So I don't tend to watch a lot of straight to kind of Netflix kind of movies. I like their kind of Korean movies and things like that. The ones that come from other parts of the world. But the one exception that I do end up having to watch are the Netflix Christmas movies because of family commitments there.
Yeah.
So
those ones you can definitely tell from the previews.
I know you can see Brockville in Hot Frosty, for instance, and various things like that. So anyway, I watched that under sufferance, just to be very clear. Anyway, no, I think you're right in terms of there is something going on that they do tend to look. They're starting to look like Hallmark movies, and I do not. That's not a compliment. But I think you're right about Amazon Prime, that they still seem to be able to kind of like make it look kind of big and real when it comes to their movies. It's one of my worries actually about Warner Brothers going to Netflix is Netflix aren't turning out particularly good movies when they're involved. Their television programs are often, very, very good.
Yes, their TV's way better than the movies. Yeah,
agreed.
Their TV shows are much, much better.
And maybe that's because they're working with TV production companies. I don't know. But whatever's going on there, their television programs tend to be much better than their movies. And so what does that mean for Warner Brothers being bought up by Netflix? It is just a concern. Netflix is, are not great in that kind of area. So, but I think Amazon, yes, it seems to me, when I watch something that Amazon's been involved in, I tend to think that their movies are better. Although I find it very annoying watching something on Amazon Prime, to be honest. So it is something I do under sufferance.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that potential purchase of Warner Brothers or merger, whatever they're actually calling it. But all I know is it doesn't scream anything good for the Superman franchise. Not that it can fall much further than it is, but it'll that's going to continue to break my heart. I just want a good Superman movie. That's all I want.
It will be nice to stream HBO stuff without having to get another streaming package, though.
Right. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, that's a good question, because they're so connected with Crave. Like, how would Crave them, for at least in Canada, become part of then Netflix, and like in the States, I could see HBO Max merging. Like, yeah, there's going to be a huge discussion. Like, something's going to happen. I think you're right, Taylor. It'll become one big platform. Definitely.
Because it's like when Disney acquired Hulu, and
Yeah.
we never had Hulu in Canada. So we were watching Hulu stuff on Disney Plus without knowing the difference, and then they phased Hulu out of America. So I could see something similar happening with HBO.
I could see that happening. Yeah,
it's so for the first couple years it's on two streaming, and then they phased out the
It is so hard in this sense being in Canada, only because for this discussion, every other part of being in Canada is fantastic, but because they really cater things to what they do in the States, and what we get is so different. We didn't even really realize anything happened with the Hulu thing. Like that's so honestly,
we didn't know what we were missing out on.
The only reason why I would notice, because we can't get HBO Max here, is we do get it through Crave. Like Crave gives you HBO. So if that goes away and suddenly becomes part of Netflix, we'll notice.
But did we get all of the Hulu stuff? That was something where you had stuff on Hulu that was third party on Hulu that I don't think we got. I remember
there's some things we didn't.
Never got picked up in Canada because the rights were owned. They hadn't bought the rights for selling it in Canada.
I'll be honest, I haven't noticed, because everything that we wanted to watch on Hulu, we were able to get through Disney Plus. So I personally haven't noticed a gap in my watching. Like, they have King of the Hill and whatever.
Like,
so
we're considered international for all their agreements. So the international agreement and like the national agreement is so different. Right. We do end up getting things, either not getting something or getting something like that. I remember that happened with all the Star Trek shows. They were on one platform, but not where we had it. We had it on a different one because of just how the rights work. Like it was, so it can get a little confusing that way.
I suppose this affects me because, like I'll be seeing some show that maybe is on Sky in the UK and on Hulu in the United States.
Right.
But they can't get that on Disney Plus because that international kind of character, where the international agreement doesn't cover Canada. So that, that's where, I've had a few times where it's like, oh, I can what? No, I can't.
Long live physical media. But that's a whole other and now this episode is going to become not Christmas at all. But that's one of the fears, is that with this merger, this buyout, whether Netflix buys Warner Brothers or Paramount buys it, what will happen if Netflix is the parent company? What's going to happen with physical media? Will they, because as far as I know, they don't put any of their stuff on physical media. Like, I don't think you can get Stranger Things on DVD. I'd be really surprised. So all this to say, buy your VHS players now and go back to watching your specials from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because who knows if you're going to be able to stream Mad Men next year.
Who knows? So there you go. We'll have to keep an eye on that merger situation or purchasing, because I think there's a lot of groups involved. So we'll see. Maybe by the time our next episode comes out, Taylor, we'll actually know, or by the time this airs, maybe there'll be a purchase. But I just want to kind of end things off by saying Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays for those who don't celebrate. And I will say also Happy New Year, because the next time you're going to hear from this show will be in 2026.
Correct.
So
it might actually be New Year's Day.
I believe it is New Year's Day that our next episode comes out. So last episode of 2025. So thank you so much, Father Quirk, for doing this.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for indulging me in my in this, because I know that it's a little bit eccentric to go with these shorter ones, but I just thought, this is such a kind of great kind of Christmas tradition around kind of, around kind of, TV and movies. And I think, hopefully people will actually go and search out some of those other ones as well, because they're just, it's a little bit different in terms of tone, but still very traditional. So again, I echo there, I echo you, Mike, in terms of, have a good Christmas. I wish all many blessings on you all, and have a good time and a relaxing time, and don't eat too much and don't drink too much, because it's but anyway, but
get scared a lot. Get scared a lot.
Yeah,
scared a lot. Absolutely.
Get
Get
scared
very
as
scared.
much as you can.
As you like. That's right. That's right. If you're not scared enough already by these, go and watch Black Christmas or something like that, like a good Canadian product. There you go. So,
well, whatever you watch, we hope you're watching something. And yeah, we'll see you in 2026.
Yeah.
Go see some movies.
Thank you for listening to You Had Me at Skip It, a Soul One Arts Inc. podcast. This podcast is produced by Mike Shepard and Austin Spinner Summer. It is a project of Soul One Arts Inc. To learn more about Soul One and all the great work that Soul One is doing in the arts community, especially in film, theater, and other performing arts, visit soul1arts.ca. You can contribute to this podcast by visiting soul1arts.ca and going to the podcast tab. You'll find all the information on You Had Me at Skip It and how you can get your questions read on air each week. Thank you again for listening.